if the situation came that you needed to drop Sachin Tendulkar, would you? And he said yes in a heartbeat.
All coaches have a shelf life.
Yes.
You can't just go on.
Absolutely, you're right. I mean, there's only one relationship that doesn't seem to have one. That's Dhoni and CSK.
I thought we were going to say marriage, and I was like, why here?
He has openly told the media that there are some players who he, in his word, mentioned a cancer to the team.
Class, pay attention. This is Cricket 101.
It's in the air. It's a 6.
It's called Century of Stories Cricket, and I've got Joy Bhattacharjya, who now has a G attached to his name because of his greatness when it comes to knowledge and panditry when it comes to cricket and sport. So, Joy Bhattacharjya G, if I may call you by your full name. We're going to talk now about a very important, sometimes controversial, but also sometimes unsung hero, which is the Indian cricket coach. So we'll go back to some of the first coaches that we can remember. It was more like a manager coach. I think if we go back to Bishen Singh Bedi.
Bish was the first because before that you just had managers. There was no concept of a coach, coach traveling with the international team.
And the manager was, to tell people, was more an admin guy who'd, get the hotel rooms.
Pure logistics guy.
Sometimes carry the bags.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Sometimes, they were ex-army officers, ex-service officers like Durrani. So it was a very different role. You never had... people thought that, guys, the captain decided what is going to happen. And the first time you had somebody like Bishen Bedi come in. And remember, at that time...
And a huge figure in cricket also.
Huge figure in cricket. And remember, Azhar is early into his captaincy.
Yeah.
He's very, very early into his captaincy. So at that point in time, he's also not particularly sure of what to do. So Bedi is a personality. So he was a very dominant personality and he made quite a few statements like,
I had the pleasure of meeting him many times. He was fantastic and, of course, what a great talent as well.
Yeah, but again, what happens is that he tried to impose his will on the team, and Bedi is a kind of person, look at him as a bowler. He'd flight it up, he's okay to be hit for 3 sixes as long as he gets a wicket.
Stumped on the fourth
So
ball.
it's an attacking sort of mode where when you attack, you always give the other team chances as well. And that was the kind of game Bedi played, or how Bedi wanted to play. And perhaps that Indian team at that time in 89, 90, 91 was not the right team for it. The other thing was, of course, he was very clear. He would say what he felt was right or wrong. And I think there was a thing with captaincy, right? If you remember, it was the Lord's Test match.
Right.
And there was a situation where India had won the toss and chose to field.
And Gooch made 330 odd. Yeah.
Gooch made 333.
Yeah.
And then later, I think he was asked that, what would you have done? Bedi. And he said, I would have... He was not asked actually. He volunteered that information that I would actually have batted first.
But could it be that Azhar was not confident with the batting? Because otherwise, everybody would have batted first in those days. Lords, normally that would be 80-90% decision for all.
He must have seen that the pitch was doing a little bit early. So who knows what would have prompted him. But Azhar was also sometimes in test matches a defensive captain.
Yeah.
Azhar was an offensive captain when he was playing in India with Kumble, going full-fledged. Kumble, Rajesh Chauhan, Venkatpati Raju going crazy. That was when Azhar would push.
Yeah.
But abroad, I think he would mostly try and defend. And I think that was not just... Bedi was not a coach who thought of it that way. And then, of course, you had a few other Indian coaches, Kapil Dev famously in 99-2000.
Not a great relationship either, or good relationship but didn't get the results.
Good relationship, didn't get results. I think Kapil also, in those days, Kapil came and said that, cricket, when he was asked about coaching, and he said cricket is a game that's played on the field. The truth is, it's not. By that time,
Well, it is and it's not.
It is and it's not. Because by 99-2000, there is things like fitness, things like, biomechanics, all this technical data started playing a factor which is a much larger factor. And I think in those days, Kapil, when you say that, played on the field, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So he was an inspirational figure. But when you're going through a tour which is really difficult...
Joy, but there's also the other thing. Bishen Singh Bedi, Kapil Dev, such great cricketers with such great talent that sometimes they expect too much out of others.
Yeah.
Because their standards are always going to be ridiculously high, and not 11 players in a team are going to be of the same standard.
Absolutely. And I think you as a coach may be an attacking coach because you were an attacking captain. But your team may not have the skills to be able to attack. Now, if you're trying to be an attacking captain in Australia, where you don't have the firepower to beat them all the time, you've got to play more defensive cricket.
Right.
And I think those are some of the things that happened. That coach and captain, that mesh I frankly never saw in Indian cricket till John Wright came along.
John Wright, who left such a nice impression, both with the cricketers and with the cricket-loving public of India. How did you see him as a coach?
I think it was fantastic because I think he was very clearly, he understood something. And let me tell you this difference. I think Bob Woolmer was in charge of Pakistan for a while. At one point in time, somebody turned around and Inzi was a captain. And somebody turned around and told him that, Inzi was sulking. So somebody asked, what's wrong? Because, he had a difference of opinion. Now, in Australia, it's very easy to have a difference of opinion. That does not mean that I don't like you or that you're wrong. It's just that we have a difference of opinion. That's how Australians or South Africans, they grow up. In Western, that culture of being able to confront without necessarily making it personal.
Personal and holding grudges.
But Inzi was upset because Indians, Pakistanis, South Asians, we have a culture of, we take it personally that, how can you argue? That means you don't like me. So he turns around and Bob Woolmer, somebody tells him that, he says, where's this thing? Where's Inzi? He says, wo root kya hai? So he didn't understand root jana kya hota hai na? Root jana in Hindi. And then when he heard it, he said, he's not my wife. Why is he why is he doing this to me? Because that's exactly what he thought. So that Bob Woolmer, for all his skills, didn't understand South Asia. John Wright would turn around and said, if I don't know when Sehwag is missing his mother's aloo ka paratha, then I will not understand him as a player. So he understood. He made it that point to understand that why particular Indian players feel a particular way, think a particular way, talk a particular way. So John Wright made that effort, and therefore the Indian players rewarded him back in full measure, because finally they had a guy who might be white, who might be from a different part of the world, but would give them encouragement and would really, really, really back them, because he tried to understand.
So John was right, is what you're saying.
John was right. John was perfect, in fact. And I think for a while they did very well together, that partnership. And of course, John Wright, this very famous part of his interview was that, apparently he, in those days also, what you won't know is Greg Chappell even then had applied to be the coach of the Indian team. And Wright got it because he was asked for a question that, if the situation came that you needed to drop Sachin Tendulkar, would you? And he said yes, in a heartbeat, because, the only thing that matters is the team winning. Nothing else, no player's reputation, nothing matters.
We'll never know whether Greg Chappell was asked the same question and what his answer was.
Yeah. Or whether the question was about Saurav Ganguly or not.
Yeah, exactly. The question came back to haunt him after a few years. We'll come back to that later. Back to John Wright. Good results. We're still not the powerhouse we are today, but we're getting there, and we're getting 4 or 5 world-class talents.
That was what the great thing about John Wright was. John Wright understood what Saurav's greatest capacity was. Saurav's greatest capacity was the fact that he could pick talent. And, Zahir, Yuvraj, they backed talent. Sehwag, Zahir, Yuvraj, lot of talent. Nehra, all of them were backed. And Saurav also had something that actually became successful only with Virat, which is that Saurav said it's not good enough to just win series in India. We want to win internationally consistently. So they had a great time together. And I think by the time he left, the only thing was that John Wright, again, staying away from home, staying away from family for that long. And more,
but they have a shelf life anyway, right? Even if you look at football, all coaches have a shelf life.
Yes.
You can't just go on. It's like prime ministership.
Absolutely, you're right. There's only one relationship that doesn't seem to have one. That's Dhoni and CSK. But
I thought you were going to say marriage, and I was like, why here?
I think at that point in time, even India needed to move on. Wright needed to move on, and I think that partnership ended there.
But it ended well. They all have fond things to say about him, and him for India in general, as well as Indian players. So I think in terms of report card, probably one of the best coaches we've had and most liked.
Most liked, I think Kirsten would be a good candidate as well. But I think he gave India stability at a time when India really needed it.
IDFC First Fact, former India coach John Wright also loves his music. And in 2016, after finishing his coaching career, he released his album called The Red Skies. He released it on the ground though. So then from John Wright we go to?
Greg Chappell.
Well, let's set it up before, because this is one of the great batsmen of his generation, one of the most respected players, a true authority on the game, a very well-read Chappell family, the grandfather, everybody. Blue blood.
Vic Richardson.
Vic Richardson, blue blood. So before we say what went wrong, what went right? Right candidate, at least on paper?
Yeah. So where does it start? The story starts in 2003-04 when India travel. And Saurav Ganguly calls up Greg Chappell and says, I want to practice with you in the nets. And he goes and he spends some time working with Greg Chappell because, he feels that he needs certain technical skills to be able to perform in Australia.
Right.
Goes and gets 144 in Brisbane.
On a bouncy wicket.
On a bouncy
and people
wicket.
are saying you can't play short bowling.
And that's the first match. So it's something that set the trend for that entire series, which we drew. We should have won in Sydney, except for a couple of dropped catches.
Yeah.
So Saurav now is very gung-ho because he feels that John Wright's taken us so far. This is the guy who will take us to the promised land beyond this. And that's why he's pretty happy. He's definitely
So he was pushing for Greg.
He's enthusiastically pushing for Greg Chappell to come.
Yeah.
And Greg, as you know, when he came in, he had everything. They gave him the money he wanted. They allowed him to shoot a documentary with ABC television following him all the way. Greg is an intelligent guy. Greg by now knows that the commerce or industry of cricket, India is now the center of it. So he knows to be India coach is a big thing. He knows he's going to make a fair amount of money, but he's going to push this for everything he's worth. So he's smart enough that way, media savvy this way, saying, okay, I want to make this happen.
So in this case, the end justifies the means. He wants to make sure he gets results.
Yeah.
We're setting this up because then it's mixed results and
what happens is that he figures that Saurav is not somebody who's working, especially in test matches, to the kind of, he doesn't feel that he deserves a chance out there, especially not as captain. And Saurav, like Indians are very emotional because first thing is he feels betrayed. Here's the guy I backed, I wanted here, and he is turning around and said he doesn't want me. I mean, what kind of loyalty is that?
The odd thing is that he hit that 144 on Brisbane fast bowling conditions when everybody said that he has a little bit of a weakness against the short ball. So thanks to Greg Chappell, he shut that out of the window. So you'd think that they'd have a really harmonious relationship after that because he's elevated Saurav's game and Saurav thinks that this is the guy.
Yeah, but see, remember, the dynamics was that when John Wright and Saurav used to work together, Saurav used to say, I want to do this, and John Wright would help him figure out how to do it. Or say, this is not what you're doing well. So the leader in that relationship was a captain-led relationship.
Okay.
It's very similar to IPL teams. All IPL teams are either owner-driven, they're coach-driven, or they're captain-driven. So CSK is always captain-driven with Dhoni.
Right.
MI is always owner-driven.
Lucknow?
I'm not even going to start there. Don't get me started. So similarly, it's a very captain-driven culture but Greg Chappell is not used ever in his life to playing second fiddle to anybody.
True.
So he turns around and says, I want to do what I want to do.
So let's understand here that what you're saying became an issue of personality more than an issue of skill or acumen.
First and foremost, an issue of personality.
Yeah.
Because Greg Chappell says, I want to decide who's in the team. Whereas before this, what was it? It would be that, John Wright, Saurav would come and say, this player is really good. I've seen this guy Dhoni, he's really good from Jharkhand, let's pick him. And the selectors would pick him and John said, you're sure about this guy? Let's back him. Yeah, I think so too. It was that kind of relationship. But now, both of them wanted to be the alpha male.
Right.
And that was a problem. And then it got to a point where Saurav's personal form suffered at that point in time. And then once that happened, now what happens to somebody who's a strong personality? He wants to mold it to his. He wants to have a say in what happens. Now, at that point in time, Greg Chappell, rightly or wrongly, thought that some other players, somebody like a Zach, somebody like a...
So he had a list apparently that he wanted out.
Yeah, in fact, I was also sent that list. No, I wasn't sent the list. I was
You were privy to it.
I was privy to the fact that he has openly told the media that there are some players who he, in his words, mentioned a cancer to the team. He used that word. Now, a large part of it was also saying, I will pick the players and what's my legacy? If I'm only going to work with players that John Wright and Saurav have already picked, then I have no legacy. So he also wanted to build a legacy of his own. And remember, till the 2007 World Cup, till that happened, they were actually getting results.
Right.
I mean, Dravid became captain.
And the BCCI was backing him. He's basically become selector as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it all basically got derailed.
What was it? Dravid, Chappell, once Ganguly was moved out of the equation, Dravid, Chappell were a good equation. They were getting along.
Dravid was happy to go along with Chappell. Chappell was the alpha male out there. And Dravid was happy as long as he felt that this guy is technically skilled and able enough to do this. So they had a good relationship. It unraveled because of the 2007 World Cup. It unraveled because of one match.
Bangladesh.
Had India won that Bangladesh match, Chappell might have.
Bangladesh is causing a lot of trouble. What's going on?
When have I heard that before?
Ouch. Back to the cricket. But the other seniors, it's almost like a revolution happened, right? From what we gather, I can't remember all the details, but a lot of the seniors, all these big stars, won't take names, all not happy with Greg Chappell's style of coaching. We kept hearing this in the media.
Yeah, look. Definitely, and many of his effigies were burnt in Kolkata, so I know that definitely.
That is the sort of story which is open, but there's about 4 or 5 other names which I won't take.
No, but to be honest with you, if you look at that way, Zaheer and Yuvraj to a certain extent, Harbhajan to a certain extent came out then. All the rest spoke about this later, post facto. Post his going, they turned around and said they were happy or unhappy. He was authoritarian. And I think that's why the move to the next coach was a very different style of coach. And I think Sunny had a large part to play in it because I think in Paddy Upton's book also they mentioned that Sunny actually reached out to Gary Kirsten,
who had not coached
and is a very totally different personality. I mean, what do you say? What's the one word that defines Gary Kirsten?
Dirty Gary. No, sorry, that's a movie. It's totally different. Yeah.
Terrible. That is terrible. Also, you're talking to a generation who wouldn't have heard
it. No one. Google it, please. Yeah.
Okay. So, what is the biggest thing about him is the fact that he as a player overachieved. Many players, many cricketers, especially coaches, thought that his elder brother Peter Kirsten was a more talented player. But if Gary had 100% talent, he'd give you 100%.
But he was a low personality even on the cricket field, in the sense that you sort of didn't even notice him. But you're right, great achievements in terms of batting. Yeah,
great achievements. 188 and all. Yeah. So he's a fantastic cricketer. He's a team guy, and he comes, and I think one of the first things he does, which I think Lakshman writes about, is, here Greg Chappell was taking them to military camps, and it's all about being tough and all that.
Aussie way, yeah.
And he's now, and look, these players have now had one foreign coach who's had a very bad experience, so they're a little bit tentative, what's going on here. And he comes in and he takes them to a camp in, I think it was in Bangalore, and then he says, okay, here you 3 different teams, Bajji, you're in charge of one, Sachin, you're in charge of one, all of you go and make a feature film. Wow. And I think Sachin's team makes
what all cricketers really want to do.
Which what they anyway. Which Salim Durrani ended up doing as a hero as well.
Sunny also in a couple. Sandy also in a couple.
Sandy also. Kabhi Ajnabi the. Yes.
You remember the name? Yeah. Marathi film. Then.
So then after that, what happens is that.
So they understand this guy is like easygoing in a sense.
And by 2008, what do you have? You have 5 aging but legitimate 5 to
superstars.
6 superstars in the team. So you have. By then, who do you have? You have
Sachin,
Sehwag,
Saurav, Rahul,
Kumble. It's like a team of superstars. If you have come to one-day cricket, you have Yuvraj, you have Zach. So you have and then Dhoni is emerging. Now, Dhoni is coming into the mix. If you look at Kirsten's coaching, it's 2 parts. First part is the old guard. And then the part of it is Dhoni and him getting together and redefine.
Without disrespecting the old guard.
And Dhoni deciding that you cannot have Dravid and Saurav Ganguly on the field together in an ODI match. You cannot. So slowly these guys are saying that, okay, this Indian team we needs to be a fitter team, a faster team. And they start putting those pieces together. And that's what basically culminates. So you still have a large part of the team, but you add certain pieces.
But his man management skills are better suited for subcontinent.
Because better
even if he's trying to ease out the older players, he's not upsetting them.
Yeah, he's not upsetting them. And again, the equation has changed back. So you had
Dhoni as the alpha.
This is something we need
to
remember.
Pay attention. This is cricket 101. Yeah.
So when Dhoni becomes test captain, taken over from Kumble, have you seen that dressing room? There are 8 players who are all senior to him. But he somehow manages to do it. He and Kirsten manage that team and get results. The only thing is that I think perhaps his heart was in it, but Dhoni never emerged for me as a test captain of note. I mean, he's won a lot of
seems to have liked the shorter format more, especially the 50-over format.
Correct. He's 50, 20, both those formats he's really flourished in. But so that's the next transition. And then when Kirsten decides that, traveling is too much, they've won a World Cup, what else is there to achieve? I want to spend time with family. When he goes back, they decide to get somebody who's perhaps the best known, least known coach in Indian cricket, which is Duncan Fletcher.
Right. Who makes Gary Kirsten look like a real extrovert. Yeah.
But Duncan is a very interesting person. If you look at Duncan Fletcher's career, again.
World Cup 83.
Yeah, 83 World Cup, Zimbabwe, that same team. Professional coach. Lot of county cricket coaching, lot of coaching. very good technically. Extremely good technically because he's... So now that's what you need because now Dhoni
is... modern age also.
Correct. Dhoni is the big boy. Dhoni is the guy who's running the team. This is the guy who's making little technical movements.
Is it true he brought in the fitness culture?
Absolutely. Apparently he sat and spoke to Kohli and told him that you're a world-beating batter. But with this kind of fitness, the ethos that you have, you're not going to make it. And therefore, regretfully, Chole Bhature left, Virat Kohli's table for many years.
He gave up non-veg, I think he gave up alcohol, he gave up cold drinks, some of the most beautiful things in the world, coloured drinks, cold drinks.
But also with some of the fast bowlers and all, he really helped because he understood. He was a very experienced technical coach, and I think that's what India needed then. Somebody who could technically help them because by that time, emotionally, leadership-wise, Dhoni is the guy.
And Dhoni and him, very good partnership. Just as Gary Kirsten's partnership with the aging cricketers and Rahul Dravid initially and then moving forward with the aging cricketers as well was pretty good, pretty fluid. One thing that's very irritating is paying forex charges anytime you travel internationally. It's very expensive and makes no sense. That's why you need to get IDFC FIRST Bank First Wow Credit Card, which is an assured card backed by fixed deposit and has zero forex charges.
And then comes Ravi Shastri.
Yeah.
And Ravi is a very different kind of personality. Both of us know Ravi for a very long time.
Yeah.
And he's just never say die. And he's exactly what a young captain needs. Virat Kohli's come in, Dhoni's unexpectedly retired, and Virat is at that time not just the heir apparent, he's the best batter in the world by a long margin.
And he's the superstar of India.
He's a superstar of India.
Yeah.
And he just needed a coach to say, we can do it. Can we win in Australia? Yes, we can do it.
Ravi, as a young man also, I mean, he's always punched above his weight. He's always been the toughest nails guy, take on the foreigners, take on different conditions, batted at every position, played the best bowlers in the world. With his left arm spin, which some people thought was innocuous, got very good results. So I'm thinking that his mentality has always been confidence, built on confidence and sheer willpower and positivity.
Positivity, hard work. You put in the yards, and that's one thing. And I've had situations where I've seen Ravi Shastri. Working in ESPN Star when I was, he might be partying till 4 o'clock at night. But if he's given you a call time at 7 in the morning, 6:55, he will be there standing ready to do what. He's a professional to the core.
Right.
His work ethic, he never. And so you see that Indian team with Ravi Shastri and Virat Kohli there. Firstly, fitness zooms up. Okay. Also, you've lost a lot of the older players have now retired. It's now Bumrah. It's a new kids who have come in. Rahane. They are all young, fit guys who he can work with. And then the ethos he had was, we have to win abroad. Virat wanted to get 20 wickets abroad, and suddenly he's got the ammunition to do that. By that time, Jadeja and Ashwin are already winning series for you. Okay.
Well, until New Zealand turned up, we never lost a damn thing. Yeah.
And now suddenly you've got Bumrah and Shami, and you can win series in Ishant, and you can win series internationally. And that's a big change because, see, again, winning series in India, we've won it for so long. It was no longer regarded as something to do which is going to make a difference. But for Virat Kohli to prove himself as captain, he wanted to go and get 20 wickets abroad.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Shastri really helped.
Prime example is 2020-21 series in Australia, where after being shot out for 36 in the pink ball test in Adelaide, they turned it around in Melbourne and subsequently in Brisbane.
Yeah.
But take us through what happened after the 36, because apparently he was very gentle or very positive about everything.
He was perfect. What he did was he just took them out for dinner and said, this is the lowest we can get. We will never go below that. And I'll tell you something. I have seen this done by good coaches all the time. What happens is when you lose, okay, the one thing we used to make sure even in KKR, when you lose, and especially bad losses. So there are two types of bad losses. Either you're trounced so badly that it's just humiliating, or it's a very close one, but you've lost. Okay, those are the losses. These two are the worst losses. Never allow players to be alone because it just plays on their head. So the moment you do that, what Ravi did, especially in the same situation with Adelaide, was get them all together, make them stay together. Don't talk about it. This is not the time to talk about it.
Right.
Okay, and just say this is the worst you could have done. Now let's do something else. Just joke, just laugh, and don't allow players to dwell on stuff like that. And all good coaches do it. In fact, very interesting in KKR. The biggest bollocking I've ever seen players get is after a win. Because coaches also, good coaches know that after a loss, anywhere the player's down, shouting at him is not going to help. So when a team wins, he could turn and say, I didn't like the way you did that. They're much stronger in it because the player's saying, take a jeet gaye. So you won't take it to heart that badly, So that way, I thought Ravi again was a perfect combination with...
and I think he did that as a captain, wherever he captained before, as well as a senior player in the team. He was always the guy who was, like, come on, guys, we'll take them on. And
yeah,
all.
absolutely.
Very positive.
If you remember Sydney again in 92,
yeah,
when he smashed Shane Warne,
almost destroyed
that 206 in Sydney, he was the kind of guy who'd stand up and not take any rubbish from anyone. Therefore, especially going internationally, having a guy like Ravi on his side, it's like having Virat had the perfect wingman. Right. Because Ravi was not the kind of person. Ravi also knew that it was not his job to tell what technical difficulties were there. That was not his thing. But what he brought to the team in terms of positivity, teamwork and everything was absolutely fantastic.
He also shared his Audi. Don't forget that in 1985. He let everybody drive it, including those without licenses. This is a fact that I have from the Australian authorities. But that's Ravi Shastri, and then we go to Rahul Dravid. Rahul Dravid gave us what Ravi couldn't give us. Ravi gave us great test results, but they failed to get that one big trophy. But we did get under Rahul Dravid.
One of the great advantages Rahul Dravid
under 19.
He has been an under 19 coach. So all these guys have played under him.
And they love him.
They love him. He's played...
The Jaiswals and all these.
Jaiswals, also Jaiswal, Samson, all these guys he has actually coached. Secondly, he was an active player much after. He played till 2014. So Dravid played till 2014 in the IPL.
So you think that's important?
I think in today's terms, because of the way the game is going, it's important, especially for shorter formats, for T20. Dravid was the first T20 coach we had who actually has played T20 to a very significant level. Before that, you had guys who saw it theoretically or saw it as commentators. Dravid has played it. Dravid has coached these guys at the younger level. So you have two advantages. You know what a guy is capable of, and now you can see how he can deliver it for you on the field. So I think Dravid had those two advantages. He's a low-key coach, but what I love about him is that he really brings numbers to the table. And in fact, recently we've been talking about it. Himanish Ganju, who's just got his PhD, really helped the Indian team with a lot of data.
These are the small little things that we don't hear about, right? That so-and-so is playing mostly off his legs. This is his weakness, whatever.
So the amount of things that are decided on the basis of data, left-right combinations, where to bowl to a particular person, all these are decided. And Rahul is because he comes from a, intellectual background in that sense.
Pursuit is always trying to intellectualize the process.
Very, very data driven, and I think you need that, and therefore you have a good combination.
So wherever there's no Wi-Fi, Rahul would have struggled, is what you're saying. Just to put matters in perspective. But if you had to choose, because there's a mix of interesting virtues on all of them, who would be the ultimate coach out of all of them if you had to choose one?
Actually, it's a very difficult question, because the most complete coach in that sense is actually, strangely enough, Rahul Dravid, because he's got a personality also. He mixes with every also. He understands data and he understands Indian players. So he's a combination, because all the rest have one very strong suit. Like Duncan Fletcher is technical. Greg Chappell is technical. Okay. So John Wright is more emotional, good this thing. Gary is also a very rounded coach.
Ravi's man management.
Ravi had this great ability to make players believe in themselves
like nobody else. Huge. It's such nobody else concept, Joy.
So perhaps I would say Ravi and Rahul are right up there.
Okay. So
though in their own times, Kirsten was a perfect coach for India in that situation.
If Ravi and Rahul had a baby, that would be the perfect coach, because we need 50% from each of them.
Stop there. Stop there.
I'm a huge fan of both, so I should be allowed a little liberty here. All right, that's all we have time for on this beautiful segment called Century of Stories Cricket. Joy leaving us with his favourite shot from when he played for Bengal. No. For Kolkata? No. For Park Street? No. For Tollygunge Club? Not even.
My college.
For your college. Which was?
It was a straight drive for one.
Straight drive for one. Let's leave you with that beautiful picture. Go ahead. Perfect. The punch. Before we wrap up, a quick warning from IDFC FIRST Bank about call forwarding scam. Scammers pose as telecom support and ask you to dial codes like *401 #activating call forwarding to their number. Never dial codes from unknown callers or share personal info. Telecom providers won't ask you to dial such codes. Remember that. Always check and disable call forwarding in your settings if activated unknowingly. So stay vigilant and protect your information like I protect my wicket.